So, we're in a series of talks on the wheel of life, which I think Edward is going to magically make appear. So you'll have probably seen hanging up in the corridor downstairs is a sort of more modern drawing of a wheel of life. This is a more traditional one. And there's lots going on in that, Vidanya talks about the wheel of life as being, you can think of it as a bit like some kind of a computer game where you can go from different rooms, different realms to different realms. But the whole point actually is to get out of the wheel of life. And this series will continue, and towards the end we'll talk about how you kind of get out of that, out of the wheel, out of going round and round in it. And what we're particularly looking at in this series is what's called the 6 realms. So you can see on this picture the bits sort of in the middle, quite the bigger segments, which have got a Buddha figure standing in each of them. They're each representing a different psychic realm of of experience, of our experience. And we've got the God realm, the Titans realm, the animal realm, the human realm, the hell realm that we heard about last week from Padmavajra. And today I'm going to talk about what's called the hungry ghost, or the preta realm, the hungry ghost. Next week, we're going to have a really quite exciting guest speaker called Satyajyoti, and he's going to talk about the animal realm. Yeah, great. Okay, so we're going to spend this evening partly in the realm of the hungry ghosts, and I'm going to describe what hungry ghosts are, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get out of that realm. It's really important how to get out. If you find yourself in the realm of the hungry ghost, how to get out of it, and also how to avoid getting there in the first place, because it's a really highly unpleasant place that you don't really want to be. So hungry ghosts, or pretas in Sanskrit, well, they're pretty desperate beings. And they live in a realm of terrible bleakness, like a desert sort of dull brown, grey, desert of rock and sand. Nothing grows there hardly at all. And this like a slow, brackish river passes through it. And the hungry ghosts, or pretas themselves, are usually represented with these enormous bellies and then tiny little mouths, which are like the size of a needle. So they've got these really big bellies that they really want to fill up, and then they've got these mouths that are really tiny and they can't get hardly anything in it. So this is one image of the hungry ghosts. You can see, the really big bellies. And what's particularly awful for the pretas, or the hungry ghosts, is that they're just completely surrounded by excrement, by things that are rotten. It's a really horrible place to live. Things are just, rotting. And their overwhelming experiences of unsatisfied desire. And even if, I could move, I'm reading the chat message. Is that better? Even if they manage to get something to eat, like there are apparently a few fruit trees growing in their realm, but they usually can't reach them, like they're out of reach. But even if they do get like a nice bit of fruit, as soon as they eat it, it turns into fire or into excrement. So it's just, they just can't get any nourishment at all. So there, see some other images. So this is a hungry ghost with fire coming out of its mouth. Presumably it's just eaten something that's turned to fire. And what's really great about all of these different realms is that there is a Buddha who can help us get out of that realm. And see the next picture as well. So here's another image of the hungry ghosts around the Buddha of that realm, who I'll come to in a minute. So these hungry ghosts are symbolic of neurotic craving. They spend their whole lives in this frustrated craving. And when they do get what they crave so much, well, actually, they just get suffering, like I said. It's like they're drinking salt water. It just makes them thirstier and thirstier. So it's the realm of addiction, people with very powerful desires that they can never really satisfy. Addiction, but it's also just the realm of junk food. I was thinking, the junk food that just doesn't nourish you at all, and you keep wanting more. So you eat some pizza, but then you want more pizza, kind of thing. Or junk entertainment, like you watch loads of Netflix, but then you want more Netflix. Or so it's the place of junk food. And because hungry ghosts are having such a horrible time, well, they're very self-obsessed. They're really concerned on their own sense of lack. That's what they focus on. So it leads to a compulsive stinginess, a grasping, and their desires can just never be met. There's never enough for a hungry ghost, or when you're in a hungry ghost state of mind, it's never enough. But whatever the hungry ghost perceives to potentially fill this gaping hole of their desires, they're going to constantly try and get more of it. And they might do that in pretty, ways that are damaging to them and other people. So manipulation, scheming, selfish behavior, hoarding, all those kind of behaviors of an addict. And, this neurotic craving, it could be well deep-seated, obviously, like we may well have had it from our parental conditioning, that I don't know, you might have, like, if you maybe when you were a bit upset when you were a child, your parents might have gone, oh, well, don't worry, here, have a biscuit, you'll feel better. That might have just started off that kind of cycle. And also, we live in a world that is really full of hungry ghosts, isn't it? Advertising, telling us that I usually see adverts when I go to the cinema, and I'm always amazed by that advert. They have loads of them, about 3 or 4 adverts usually, of cars that are really nice cars, I imagine, and they're like going through empty countryside. And it's a bit like these cars promise you a road with no other cars on it at all, in a really beautiful place, and all this freedom. Whereas, of course, if you actually really drive about in a car, you know that usually the road's full of other cars, and it's like promising you some kind of a freedom or something a car won't ever provide. Actually, it won't ever provide. Yes, so it comes from, so wherever it comes from, whether it comes from our conditioning, the society we live in, it's the same fundamental mechanism. So we're seeking one thing, so we're seeking freedom, but we try to consume another by having a really fast car. We're looking in the wrong place. We're looking for affection, so we think that eating cake will give us that same feeling, that affection will, and of course it won't. So these neurotic desires just remain constantly unfulfilled. And some of our neurotic desire is validated in our culture. So, for instance, I guess, that very kind of neurotic romantic love that's based on, this partner will give me everything that I need, this very neurotic, or status, that trying to get the right job, going to get really high status in life, objects, gadgets. But there are other kind of forms of addictions that we have that we tend to look down on a bit, which is like addiction to alcohol or drugs. But it's all the same thing, I think nearly everyone will, presumably in the room, connects it some way with the hungry story, but, with this hungry ghost syndrome. We all have our own version at different levels. Some of us are more addicted than others, but it's part probably of all of our experience. However, it's important that, of course, in a very human way, our desires, many of our desires are natural and wholesome. So they're necessary for us to survive and flourish. So things like, wanting to eat good food, have good connections with people, express ourselves, have shelter. They're all good, healthy desires. But the trouble is, they become fixated on substitutes quite often. So we're looking for one thing, but we're looking for something underneath it, but we go to somewhere else for it. And it could be all sorts of things, alcohol, drugs, perfectionism, approval, whatever it is, it can catch us, confine us. And then we just, it really creates tremendous pain for us and other people in our lives. Yes, so this realm is often, as I said, associated with these addictions. So these things that give a real rush of satisfaction. So the hungry ghosts don't want just pleasure, but that rush of satisfaction. And hungry ghosts often go from one thing to another. So maybe lots of social interaction, acquiring new stuff, new experiences, food, alcohol, drugs, whatever. It's never satisfying. Hungry ghosts feel empty most of the time. Yeah, and so whenever we're living in the future, whenever we're thinking, oh, when I get this, then I'll be happy, then I'll be okay. That's being in the hungry ghost realm. And of course, some things will, it's like, if you want a new pair of shoes because you want to go on a walk or something and your feet need protection, Probably, hopefully, buying a pair of shoes will do that for you. If you want a new pair of shoes because they're going to somehow make you really glamorous, well, they might do that a bit, but, or if, they're going to provide you with the kind of, that feeling you get like, oh, if only I had that thing, then everything would be fine. That's when it becomes a neurotic craving, when you're thinking that whatever it is that you want will give you far more than it actually can. And of course, that is just going to lead to so much suffering, isn't it, when we realize that whatever it is doesn't actually provide what we want. And then we go on to another thing. And interestingly, isn't it, I think Pamavajra mentioned this last week, that in a way, many of us are seen as consumers. That's what we're called, by lots of companies and things like that. We are beings who consume in society. We're not human beings to them. There's an interesting phrase I thought from a Canadian doctor called Dr. Gabor Mate, who some of you might know, who works a lot in addiction. I thought this was really beautiful. He said, he's written a book called The Hungry Ghost, which is about addiction. And he says, we haunt our lives without being fully present. We haunt our lives without being fully present. And I think there's something really strong in that sense of, we're just kind of not in our lives, actually. We're just kind of so full of craving the next thing or craving something. We're not actually present in what is actually happening to us. So that's the very sad world, the very suffering world of the hungry ghost. So how can we escape? How can we escape from that realm, or hopefully avoid just never getting in there at all? So as we saw, each realm has a Buddha that offers a way that we can escape from the realm. And in the realm of the hungry ghost, it's a red Buddha. And it's a bit, I think the kind of, I don't know, whatever the word is. I'm not sure how historically valid this is, but I'm going to go with it anyway. We often see the red Buddha in this realm as being Amitabha Buddha, who we have on the shrine here, this very beautiful shrine behind me. And Amitabha is a Buddha, I don't know if you can all see him. He's particularly associated with compassion and love, with warmth and with wisdom and with meditation. And the red Buddha gives hungry ghosts what we all really need, which is food and drink that is nutritious for us and that nourishes us. And in the end, that is the Dharma. What will really all nourish all beings in the long run is the Dharma. So, in the long run, the only thing that will truly satisfy us is the truth of how things are, and to live in accordance with that. But we keep going, looking for love in all the wrong places. But Amitabha Buddha can offer us what we actually need. And I'm just going to run through about 4 or 5 of some of these things. So the first is he offers us a chance to be aware, to bring awareness to our experience, so that we know that when we're in the hungry ghost realm, because actually it can be like a spell. I know that in the past going on holiday has been quite nice, but it's never actually completely satisfied me and sorted out all my problems. But when I get it in my head that I really need to go somewhere, I can really kind of feel like, this holiday will really do it. For instance, we'll all have our own, examples of that. This book, maybe I do it a lot with books as well. If only I get this right book, it's Buddhist book actually, so it's all very kind of ethical, whatever. But this Buddhist book will be the one that tells me the answer to everything, and I will never suffer again. And of course, the Buddhist book might be full of wisdom, but if I don't put it into practice, it's not going to make any difference, to me. So it's a bit like, so this is, we're under a spell sometimes when we're hungry ghosts. So awareness is really important, because we need to be aware to break the spell, to know that we are enchanted, evilly enchanted. So that's about really being in the gap, actually, which hopefully everybody remembers from the newcomers course, that when we're aware, we can be in the gap. That means that when we are feeling a lot of craving for something and we think we really ought, we really need to do it this time, actually, it's really important this time, we can perhaps try and be in the gap and make a more creative response, a different decision to how we respond to that craving, to that trigger. Another way that awareness really helps is that when we're present and appreciate what's actually happening at the moment, well, my experience is I'm much more likely to find beauty and joy in what's going around, and much less likely to need something around me. something else to kind of make me more. And it's amazing how this can happen in the kind of most unlikely of situations. You know, it's like, if I can just sit still a bit, breathe a bit, kind of get my awareness in my feet and ground myself, even in what seems like an ugly place, you can sometimes find beauty. And then I don't crave so much for something different. And of course, you know, there's all sorts of beauty going on that we're just not aware of quite often, especially at this time of year with the bird song and spring. Lots of beauty that the more we're present and appreciate what's going on. And actually, the more we can be present with our suffering as well, the less likely we are to get into craving loops as well. Because if we can bring this kind of a kindly awareness to our suffering and be with it, we're less likely to jump off into whatever our addiction of choice is. Yeah, and I think there's a kind of like humility that awareness can bring to us as well. It's a bit like, well, quite often we think, no, this thing I really do need, you know, it's not just that I want it, I really do need it. And I think there's a humility where we can think, well, actually, until I'm fully enlightened, I'm probably going to be craving all sorts of things all the time and in all sorts of addictive cycles that I don't even know what they are. So there's something about having that humility to challenge what's going on for us. And we might make the decision that what we want is completely valid and fine to want. Do you know what I mean? But it's just like we can ask ourselves, how much is there this neurotic craving, this hungry ghosting in there? And I think also if we've got awareness, we can ask ourselves, what is it that I really want? What is it that I really want? And will this object give me this thing that I'm craving? Will it give me what I want? You know, I mean, we always use examples of cake, which is a bit, I suppose cake's very neutral in a way, isn't it? It's like, but you know what I mean? I'm craving this bit of cake in the afternoon. Is it really cake that I want actually? Or is it actually that if I went for a walk, you know, I need a bit of a kind of rest, or I even need to drink water? You know, it's just like, we can just have these cravings about all sorts of things. And there's a really lovely quotation from Sangha Night, which I think I'm going to read out here. Sangha Night is the founder of this Buddhist movement. And he says, when we are in a state of neurotic desire, the next step is for us to get back to objectivity, which also means getting back to the present. We must see what the desired object is actually able to give us and what it is not able to give us. We must see what it is that we really desire, whether or not it is the desired object. And we must see where the desire is coming from. So there's something about slowing down, becoming aware of what do we really want? What does this object actually going to give us? And actually, where is the desire coming from in us? Understanding ourselves. Okay, so awareness is the first one. And the second one is metta, loving kindness. So if we're in the hungry ghost realm, well, gosh, there's a lot of suffering going on, such a lot of suffering. So we need to meet it with as much kindness as we can. And actually, often what we want when we're really craving something is love and connection. So the more that we can give ourselves that love and connection, the less we're going to be looking to the outside world for it. And one way that we can do that, actually, as well as like doing, you know, metta for ourselves and other people, is to turn to the figure of Amitabha or another Buddha and actually imagine that we are receiving love, what we want from that Buddha. That can be a really strong way of connecting with love. Another thing we need to do with metta and with love is to watch out for the second arrow. Because if we're in a craving cycle, if we've got our addiction going on, we often feel really rubbish about ourselves. We can see how needy we are. We see how futile it is, actually, all this grasping after something. And we can heap on like another layer of self-hate onto ourselves, of shame, unhealthy shame and self-aversion, which you could see as being like the second arrow. It's a bit like the first arrow is the fact we're having this craving in the first place, this neurotic craving. The second arrow is, oh my God, I'm such a horrible person because I'm doing this. You know, I really hate myself because I'm doing it. But that doesn't help. That just makes things worse if we're going round and round, stuck in craving, shame. In fact, that shame can often make me want to go and do the very addictive thing that I'm trying to give up more. Remember when I was giving up smoking? Like if I felt like, oh God, you're a really rubbish person because you're still smoking, I'd go, oh, I really want a cigarette now. You know? So, you know, it's just that, it really doesn't help being horrible to ourselves. So there's something about really having a lot of metta when we're stuck in this realm. And what we need to do is we look for what the deeper needs are with metta, for whatever it's for connection, that we can just really look to those deeper needs. So the third area that can help us stay out of that realm is ethics, behaving ethically, following the 5 precepts. And I think all 5 precepts really help, but I'm going to just particularly talk about 2. So the first is generosity. Because generosity just completely counteracts the self-obsession of the addict, whatever our addiction is, however big or small it is. Because when we're in the state of addiction, of craving, we're just so self-obsessed. It's all about, I really want my whatever it is, that's what I want. And I don't care about myself or other people, I just really want that thing. And there's something about generosity, even in the smallest way, that I think can really break that cycle. So, just kind of going, whoa, what's going on here? Can I smile at another person? Can I connect with another person? Maybe listen to another person? Maybe actually, just give in some way that takes me out of this cycle. And interestingly, in the early Mahayana sutras, there's quite a few stories about hungry ghosts, and they're linked to meanness, both meanness in terms of like not giving people things, like somebody, like there'd be a story of somebody and a beggar comes up and says, could I have a glass of water or whatever? And they'd go, no, you can't. Like that kind of meanness. And also just the kind of meanness in being like really nasty to people. So that it's like the hungry ghosts, as well as being linked to neurotic craving, they're also linked to this kind of stinginess and this meanness, this contraction within ourselves. And I think the more we can be generous in different ways, we can be less mean, less stingy, and less likely to experience the state of the hungry ghosts. And the second precept that obviously really applies and helps here is stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So really learning to enjoy what we already have, gratitude for what we already have. Which leads on to the fourth area, which is wholesome pleasures, which don't sound that much fun actually, do they? But wholesome pleasures, I've called it. Pleasures, that are not junk pleasures, basically, and pleasures that lead to stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So friendship, being in nature, enjoying the arts, enjoying good music. I put enjoying good food, healthy food, enjoying health, both literally and metaphorically, healthy food. So getting away from this like junk food diet of the heart and the mind and body, and being able to be with ourselves and just sit with ourselves and just enjoy that bird song, enjoy the nature. And in here is joy in meditation as well, and other practice. So if we are absorbed in our practice, in our meditation, that is really pleasurable. And the more we can experience pleasure in meditation, the less we're going to need to turn to outside other ways of getting this pleasure. And other things like doing ritual together, working together like people did at the Sangha Works Day yesterday. There's ways of just enjoying ourselves together. So the next one is, and the final one is wisdom. Because ultimately, the only way that we're going to completely leave the hungry ghost, or they're going to leave us alone, is to understand where this feeling of lack comes from, this hole, this void within us that we feel sometimes. The more that we can see how things really are, the less we're going to feel that. Because the reality is that we're deeply interconnected. We're deeply interconnected. And this constant state of lack that we have is because we think that we're incomplete, because we think that we're separate from the world. We think that we have a fixed, stable, unchanging ego identity that we can point to and claim to as our own, and that we need to protect it. But actually, of course, as we know, we're always changing. So looking for some kind of stability in this change that's going on is just going to be really frustrating. And the only true security available to us is the security that comes from realizing we don't need to cling. We don't need to cling on to anything, actually, not to any possessions or experiences. That change is inevitable, and actually that change is all right in the end. It's okay. So only by letting go can we be free of the pain of neurotic craving. And interestingly, actually, it's not that we lose anything when we see through that we don't have a fixed, stable self, because we never had a fixed self in the first place to lose. But what we do understand then is how interconnected we all are. And in that interconnection, we no longer need to be a hungry ghost looking for something outside ourselves to make us feel whole. So I'm going to finish with a poem that's written by the poet Rumi. And I found it in a talk that Tara Brach gave. So the poem is: this is how a human being can change. There's a worm addicted to eating grape leaves. Suddenly, the worm wakes up. Call it grace, whatever. Something wakes up the worm, and it's no longer a worm. The worm is the entire vineyard, and the orchard too, the fruit, the trunks, a growing wisdom and joy that doesn't need to devour.